Normally think of debt as a cold institutional thing. It's on the other side of a statement, on the other side of a piece of paper, on the other side of a wall that's faceless and humanless, which is where I believe we stop thinking of it as a structure that has fluidity, a structure that we can be creative around. And if we humanize it, that's the moment where debt can become something that we take the walls off of. Put debt inside of your home and imagine it in your neighbor's home. If you were taking debt from your neighbor's home, how would you think of it differently? If you were taking it out of someone, sometimes when I want a big piece of debt, I think of like a big ass mansion and the person that lives in that mansion. It's real easy for me to want to humanize that in a different way than I would for my neighbors, right? Humanizing doesn't mean play small and it doesn't mean play little, but it does mean to remove the firm structured walls that make it rigid. Debt is borrowed money from another person that must be repaid with interest that meets their goals and mine. Because the bank has goals when they lend money. Let's just get real clear on that, right? If a bank is lending us money, they have a goal on that. It's a reason they have prepay penalties when you take out a loan with them. They don't want you paying that shit off early. They want the interest. And if you're going to pay it off early, darling, you got a fee for that because they were planning to make that interest for a certain amount of time at a certain amount of rate because they had plans for that. And they had a business model that depended on that. And they lent a specific amount of money based on that. Now, when it's rigid inside a box, we forget that sometimes. It's a box, but put a human behind it. And now sometimes we take off the box and we rehumanize it. Debt starts to have more fluidity. Now define equity for me. How would you define equity? Well, you're putting in the chat what you think equity is. Just remember, I want you to humanize it. Now you're humanizing it, my friend. Hard-earned money. The buyer put at risk to buy the property. Now, if we make it ourselves, right? Recognized but unavailable money. Yeah, it could be capability to create more leverage in next opportunity. Now you guys are getting it. The market value less the debt. When we humanize it, when we make it the risk that's tethered to it, and a few of you guys really got that. If I'm putting equity in a deal, I'm taking some risk on that. That's money coming out of my bank account. That's money coming out of some account that I hold, right? Or even if it's an entity, but I'm going to make it mine for a minute. I have 4 young kids, 3 that are 5 and 1 that's 9. That's money coming out of a bank account that impacts those 4 young kids. That's risk. That is risk that I'm taking that out and I am putting it in to an investment that I'm praying to God will pay off the way that I think it will. Or I'm putting it into a home that I'm hoping I can afford to put into the lifestyle that I want to create for them. There's risk in that. When I humanize that equity piece, for me as the agent, that's not a big deal. For me as the investor, big deal. Now, as the agent, as the advisor, flip it. How the hell do you talk to your clients about it differently now? The sales language around debt and equity, I want you to start humanizing that. Because the more you humanize it, the more creative you can become and the more you'll get them coachable to follow you into the structures we're going to talk about today. That's why we're slowing down and really dialing in those 2 definitions. I want you to challenge yourself in the way you talk about them. Because the way you talk about debt and equity with your clients will absolutely impact the way that in the next 12, 18, 16 months, in the next 5 years of your career, it'll challenge the way that you get your clients to think about seller financing, JV structures, and partnership. It'll challenge the way that you're allowed to enter yourself into deals in your pipeline and into the market that you participate in. Of the terms that we talk about today, those are the 2 that I think you have to humanize, because if you don't, you will miss the biggest opportunities in your market. Yeah, you got to make equity connect to the emotional risk. Remember, we all think and move through our reticular activation system. So if my programming, which is what you give your clients, becomes my thought, which becomes my feeling, and that's going to drive my action or inaction, right? You are programming your client to think and to have an emotional reaction to what you say. You want them thinking about the humanization of debt and the emotional risk of the equity they're using in the smartest ways possible, so they look at deals through the same lens you're going to encourage them to.
Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to ask you if you take a moment and subscribe to our channel and click that little bell so you're notified every time we drop a new video. We always answer questions, and likes and comments really help us know if we're on track and giving you what you want. Now back to Alicia.
Now let's go through a few more terms that are important today. I'm not going to go in the weeds as much as I did on debt and equity, but they're still important. Another term that's important in this foundation we'll put around these structures today is interest. Interest is the cost of using someone else's money. The cost of using someone else's money. At a PB&J level, interest is the cost of using someone else's money. Amortization, PB&J level, how your payments are structured over time. Is it a long loan? Is it a loan paying down? Or is it interest only? The way I decide the structure of the loan, that's the way my amortization is structured. It could be a 15-year, 30-year amortization, or it could be an interest-only loan. Balloon payment, also called a bullet in some portions of the country. It's a large one-time payment at the end of the loan term. If you're the buyer, it's the unfortunate Christmas gift you still owe at the end of the year, or at the end of the transaction, at the end of the loan cycle, right? So if I have a 5-year note that I got screaming debt on back in 2020 that's coming due right now, and interest rates are 2 or 3 times what I got back then, darling, Christmas is feeling painful right now. And you guys should have been and should still be on the phone looking for those refinance opportunities, because those people might be sellers today. They might be your January, February inventory, right? Private capital versus institutional capital. Now, this is where that humanization might scale back just a little bit, but don't take it away. It's humans versus institutions. Both have pros and cons. Both have their place in any of the structures that we'll talk about today, but both deserve humanization because there's a human at the top of either. And then joint venture, also called JV. This is a partnership formed by something neither party could do alone. A partnership formed by something neither party could do alone. Here's what JVs don't work. When there's a player at the table that could do it alone and they don't need the other, that JV is not going to work. So when you're talking to a seller, let's say it's a piece of land. I'm going to give you an example right now for my younger agents. You're talking to a seller, it's a piece of land, it's worth $2 million today, but they know that it's a prime piece of development land. They know that when it's built and developed, it's going to be worth $5 or $6 million. It's a cash cow, it's going to be incredible. And they want to JV with someone on the value of that $5 million right now. They want to have a developer come in and they want to JV with that developer on it. The developer could pay $2 million for the land all day right now, but the seller is not a seller at $2 million. They're a seller at $5 million because of the potential future value of the land. But they'll JV with a developer at $5 million. Anyone ever heard this? Just me? Just my sellers in California? Unfortunate. That is not a JV that's going to work. And I've watched agent after agent after agent take deals like that to the market and waste their time, energy, and resources hunting for those sellers. I'm quoting it because that's not a seller, that's an owner. They've worked for those sellers, used their energy and not gotten to a deal. They can't figure out why. They're burned out and broke at the end of 6 months or a year. This because that wasn't a deal that could be a JV. JVs only work when both parties in the deal show up and neither party could do it alone. When one of them could, that JV won't work because the other person's really coming to the table probably asking for an unfair seat. And the person that could do it alone sees that. Most developers look up and they know that game that seller's up to. So let me give you a case study on this, right? I have an example of a deal that was exactly this. It should have died, but it didn't. I don't know why it didn't. It definitely should have. It was a few years back. I was still in California, and it was a mixed-use property that was apartments over retail. Hit the market for $2.4 million. The buyer loved it. Numbers were tight, but workable. Super doable, right? That deal should have no problem at all. But at the end of the day, the client looked up and the bank that they went to wasn't willing to do it. We went to a second bank, went to a third bank. They weren't willing to do it. The highest we got a bank to was 1.8 million lending. So instant gap, dead deal. But this is where most agents throw their hands up and go, well, bank's dead. Bank said no, deal's dead. We sat the seller down and said, listen, you want to sell and the buyer wants to buy. The only thing missing is structure. Would you consider carrying a $600,000 note in seller financing? She owned the property free and clear. Now, this got sticky because part of the structure, and this will be required, part of the structure on that note being the second note, right? We got the 1.8 covered. We just needed the 600K gap covered. She needed to be a second, right? And not all sellers will agree to that, but this one did because she really wanted to get out of the property. She just needed a guarantee. He put his home up as the guarantee. And so the seller agreed. We had to dial in terms on this. The terms were really simple. She took a slightly higher than market interest rate. She took it at 5.5 interest. She took a 10-year amortization on it with a 5-year balloon. And when you take the second, it's called a junior lien position. So the buyer got the property, the seller got the additional income, and we got the deal done representing both sides, oddly enough. The problem wasn't the price. I want you to realize that. The problem was not the price. We could look at the surface level and say, oh, price is too high, or price is the gap. Nope. The problem was structure. Price is not the problem. Structure must be solved. So when you think about seller financing, which is where we're going to go first, the main critical point you've got to take out of it is that it is not about, it's not just about price. And looking at deals, you can't just on the surface level say, okay, the price is the gap, this deal's dead. And you can't put seller financing on every deal. One of the qualifying conditions of seller financing is what? Drop in the chat. What do you think has to happen on seller financing? There you go, Raymond. The seller has got to own the property free and clear in most cases. Not 100% true, but 95 to 98% true. The seller's going to need to own that property free and clear. And so I want you to understand that before you just go to it and go, uh-oh, you can't, like, price is in the gap. Alicia, price is in the gap. It's the structure. Pause. Does seller own the property free and clear? Because if they don't, that may not be your solve. We'll have other solves today, but seller financing works and it's very elegant. It makes the seller have more money. Structure is the solution though, right? Okay. So the three levers that we can control on any deal that we have in seller financing is structure, team, and time. And that's in any creative solution.